All right, I've got 12:59 Apple time, so we're going to start 1 minute early. Those of you who know me know I like to begin and finish on time. I'm Mark Sampino, the director of the Professional Enrichment Platform. We have something different today. We have a survey that we're going to ask you to complete because the dean wants to not only know the quantity or the number of people that attended these events, but we want to know what you thought of them. Are we doing the right thing? Are you getting value from what we're presenting? Jose, do you want to just talk about the QR
Just a
code?
couple of quick questions to see if we can improve anywhere or how we're doing and what your guys' thoughts are. If you want to have any suggestions for any future speakers or any future tracks you want to include, we left a spot open for that as well. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill it out, thank you so much.
So you can do the QR code, or if you're old school like me and you like paper and pencil, there's a paper one up there, but please complete it because if you don't, I'll get in trouble. How's that? I'm just lay it on the line. We're winding down the series. This Wednesday is the challenges of starting your own business with Richard Meisenheimer. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, I think you get a great deal of value out of Richard's session if you haven't signed up for that already. And then a week from today is our last PEP session for this semester, and it's going to be the conclusion of our artificial intelligence. Jim is going to come back and present to us one more time. Let me tell you, no one has greater love for his school. Jim's an alum. He drove all the way back from Florida yesterday with his two daughters and his two dogs in one shot all the way through, and he's here to live to tell about it today. And then the first thing he does is he drives all the way down from Boston to address you, his fellow will-be Southern graduates. So I think just that right there, that deserves a round of applause for service above and beyond. Jim is going to talk today. His title is Integrating Generative AI in Organizational Processes. And I think he's also going to talk a lot about how AI is going to affect your career path and career decisions, things like that. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about him. Jim is an accomplished healthcare leader with extensive experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech sector. He was telling me some unbelievable stories about what they're doing in both. He's been a key contributor to the notable achievements and evolution of such organizations of Alexion and Alnylam. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was struggling with that one. Where he currently serves as CIO. Jim has a deep understanding of the entire program lifecycle, from research and development through post-commercial operations and manufacturing, and is a key member of the executive commercialization team tasked with setting strategic direction and operational oversight for global expansion and product launches. From 2018 to 2020, they did 3 product launches in 20 different countries. He's experienced at using artificial intelligence, of course, and process automation to drive innovation and foster growth, underscoring a commitment to accelerating healthcare advancements for patients around the world. So, Jim, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
Yeah, thanks everybody. So for those of you that attended last week with Mr. Sherwal Murtaza, I took some feedback from him on what folks wanted to see, and I incorporated that into this deck, and we've switched it around a little bit to make it more, I think, oriented towards what to expect when you graduate. How do you add value to the companies you're going to go to as they start to really move on some of the recent advancements of artificial intelligence? So we can kick it off. So here's the agenda. I thought we'd focus a little bit on, as a student, what do you need to know about these businesses? There are 3 different types of businesses. We're going to talk about that and how they focus on AI. And how can you, as a graduating student entering into these businesses, how can you add value? And how can you contribute to their success? So we'll talk a little bit about what I categorize as 3 different types of organizations and how these organizations think about AI and what their expectations are of the people that they bring in, and how you can add value to these organizations. Sound good? So we'll jump in. So 3 types of organizations. So I think, in my experience, and this is a gross simplification, right? There are 3 different ways that 3 different types of companies in the way they think about new technologies or even new business kind of ideas. One is the wait and see organization. And they tend to focus a little bit on traditional business practices. They know what they know how to do it, they do it well, and they want to keep doing it, right? They watch and monitor the success and failures of others. So, for example, if you're making widgets and there's another company down the road making widgets, and maybe they adopt a new style of making that widget, or they incorporate AI, for example, they're going to wait and see how that company does before they do it on their own. They're not going to take the risk. They're not going to spend the money. But they tend to learn by example, and they know how to do it quickly after it's done. So they can usually adopt and adapt pretty quickly, assuming that they haven't fallen so far behind that they become irrelevant, right? And I think we've seen this a little bit with Apple and the way they've approached AI as opposed to some of their peers like Microsoft and others, at Google, for example. The second one is this, I've dubbed the strategic accelerator. And I would put the large majority of companies in this, and I think these are the companies you're going to run into. They do think about how to add value and how to accelerate their business processes in their business. And they like investing and experimenting. And they're willing to make mistakes, but they want to learn from those mistakes. So they might try a technology like AI. They might apply it to a specific business area, or they may apply a new business process to a new business area. And they're willing to learn from the outcome of that and then take that output and apply it again until they get better and better. They also are focused on lowering costs, increasing revenues, and in some cases, entirely new lines of business. And with AI, I think we are seeing entirely new lines of business pop up, which is interesting. And we're going to talk about that more in the third category here. But those are the majority of businesses out there. They either dabble or they spend excessive amounts of money, but they're willing to try, recognizing that it might not work, but they're going to learn from it. And they're going to upskill their staff, and they're going to potentially, get out in front of their competitors, have some competitive advantage. And then the third one is what I dubbed all-in organizations, and these are organizations that are focused on AI, right? These are organizations that have built their business model around it. If you think back to many years ago when, dot-coms were all coming out, that was a new business model. You had all these companies, which like Amazon.com, which obviously didn't make it, but they were all in on the dot-com and the internet, right? So, oh, thank you. I'm told at home that I'm pretty loud, so I probably don't need this, but they're all in, and we're seeing these companies pop up all over the place. I think in my field, so I'm in the biotech pharma industry. We are seeing companies that are purely based now on doing all of their R&D, and all of their whole business model is around AI, right? So they're not doing clinical trials in humans or doing drug discovery in a lab. They're using real world evidence and all the hard work done by other people in biobanks, which are genetic biobanks, which are if you have Ancestry or 23andMe, for example. Those are two examples, but there's larger ones around the world, like the Chinese have a very sizable genetic database for their population, and the UK also has another one called the UK Biobank, which is available to us in the US. And they are basically building their model around that. Or they're taking a process that's done by many, such as supply chain operations, and they are building a whole new AI model around that. So they're very data-focused organizations. They tend to be optimized, and we're going to talk a little bit about their business model, which is a little different than what we've seen in the others, and how they gain customers and how they think about AI. So if we think about these three, we'll talk about the first one first, which I think is the wait-and-see organization. Are you guys familiar with the hype cycles in general? So there's a really great resource out there when you graduate, and you get into business. And I don't know why none of the images are showing up, but I apologize for that. But they're on my screen. But the images that it's strange. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The hype cycle is the path that's, I really need it because it's unfortunate. This is an important one, but one second.
I want to see if you can find Kyle.
Yeah, it's not here. I have another picture of it from a presentation for next week. So here it is. Let me just pull it up here. Can you guys see this? I'm just going to make it really big. So a hype cycle essentially is the path that something follows from being sort of hyped up. So, hey, we have this new technological innovation called large language models and AI. It can change the world. It could do everything, right? And then the expectations in the marketplace get really high. Like, oh my God, we don't need to do, clinical trials anymore in humans. We're going to use AI to discover medications, right? For example. And then there's the reality of it. Like, well, it makes a lot of mistakes. Do you really want to do that? right? Or, for example, we use it for, you can use it from everything from answering a phone call, but it makes mistakes. Or it could be bias, right? It may answer questions a certain way that lean in a certain direction, not political, well, maybe politically too, but even in terms of right or wrong, in terms of because of the knowledge that it's based on. So it may tell you something's correct, but it's not really correct because it's making it up. We call it hallucinations, and Murtaza probably talked about that last week. So the hype cycle is people get really excited about it. And these are different AI technologies and LLM technologies on the hype cycle, but it looks like this curve, right? And so everyone gets really excited about it, and then the excitement starts to fade as it starts to fail, right? Because it can't do all the things that it's being. In reality, we're probably just on the right side of that. People are now experiencing the failures of LLMs because they've done a lot of implementation, a lot of experimentation with it. And an LLM, for those of you who are like ChatGPT, right? And so ChatGPT does some things really, really well, but it makes a lot of mistakes, and it does, other things very, very poorly. And that's been our experience as well. But eventually, we get back down to reality, and then it starts to get better and better and better because people's expectations have been reset. And I think, if we go back to that other presentation, the wait and see companies, they want to be down here. They want to wait, and they want to get past the hype, and they want to invest in these technologies once they've proven themselves. Okay. Okay, so now we'll go back in. Well, I'm not presentation mode anymore. I apologize. Oh, here. Okay. So how do you, as a graduating student, you're going to go into one of these companies? And you feel free to stop me if you want to talk more. If those of you, for example, who didn't attend Murtaza's session last week, if you want to talk more about AI, or if you want to talk specifically around generative AI or any of those things, I'm happy to do that as well. So we can make this really interactive, right? We have an hour. This really is to benefit you and not me. So, please feel free to kind of shape this. There's a few different ways as a graduating student you want to think about approaching those organizations if you want to contribute from an artificial intelligence perspective and be part of that evolution, because I do think this is really important, and I do think it changes the game for a lot of us, especially as we move into the workforce. One is work is different. Somebody said to me, and I actually really think this is true, AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows AI will, right? And I think that's a really important thing to think about as you graduate and then you're moving into organizations, because the companies that are waiting to see won't be waiting to see too much longer. They're going to jump in, and they're going to start to get their feet wet, and they're going to start upskilling everybody in that organization. And as a graduating student, you want to have those skills going in. So how do you do that? How do you add value as you move in? One is you want to be familiar with and for the type of company that you're going to go into, and everybody's going to go into some industry, right? So you'll either go into finance and accounting, you might be going into IT, you could be going into manufacturing, you could be going into sales and marketing. What AI technologies, what AI capabilities are popular in that arena? What things are making a difference, right? And how can you contribute that information as you go in and talk about it, even in your interview, but even as you get on board, helping to educate the organization on the art of what's possible? How can you be that change agent for the organization? You're going to add value in doing that. You want to so sharing the success stories of others and generating interest and excitement, right? So following media, following what's going on in all of so even marketing materials, like there's marketing magazines, online magazines, same thing in IT. In the biotech industry, we have endpoints and all these other sort of kind of blogs that we follow. All of them now are focused on how companies are using artificial intelligence to change the game, to accelerate drug development, for example, in our case, or to change marketing. So people aren't generating marketing materials anymore. They're using AI to do it, right? So if you work for an agency, like an ad agency, and you're developing concept artwork, well, that might be a problem for you if you don't know how this is affecting. So I have a friend who runs an ad agency in New York City, and they laid off 40 people because they're using AI now to generate all their drafts. And so, but they hired a bunch of people that know AI, and they're actually being able to use these tools, right, to actually generate these drafts. And the organizations are doing it on their own now too. So they're generating tools for the organizations to generate their own drafts, but then they come in and they, finalize these marketing materials. So it's important to know what's going on and being able to speak about that when you go into organizations and let them know that you are, able to contribute at that level, and what's kind of going on in the marketplace. Generate that excitement in the organization. Show how you might be able to change the organization to take advantage of some of these strategies. And you may want to also identify and propose quick wins. And we're going to talk about that on the strategic accelerator slide. But as you're a new employee and you go into a business, the benefit that you have over people like me is that I've been doing what I do for a really long time. And it's harder for me to see things a different way. When you guys move into businesses and whatever your career is going to be, you're approaching it with a fresh set of eyes and you're going to think of things that they won't, right? So I always, kind of we all think about electric cars and adding a computer screen to the front of the car and like adding all that. Nobody in the car industry really would have thought of that. You had to be someone from the outside, right, to think differently. It's the same thing. Artificial intelligence, you can apply that to business processes across your organization. But in my experience, it's been a struggle to get people that operate those processes to think that way because it's really rethinking work, and they've been doing it for a long time, and this is the way we do it, and they don't think about the outcome, they think about the work, right? And so I think, as new students, you're innovators, right, whether you know it or not, and you're going to be able to go in and actually see things from a fresh set of eyes. So when someone asks you to do something, you can think to yourself, this could be done better if it were automated, or if we had a solution that could answer like phone calls, um, to answer the calls on our behalf, and then we just process the information. We could be faster than our peers, faster than our competitors. You also want to gain alignment with management. So with the wait and see organizations, aligning with management on when is the right time to do some of this stuff is critical. You got to know your organization. And so I think as a graduating student and you're moving into a new business area and you're excited about AI and you're talking to them about what some of their peers are doing and some of the successes that they're having, to follow it with, and we can do that too, right? And here's what the outcome could be, right? These are areas that we could do this pretty quickly, especially if there are third-party products. Like a great example of AI, does everybody use Zoom? I don't know if Southern uses Zoom. All right. So Zoom has the note-taking capability built into it. It's AI, right? So you turn it on and it'll actually scribe for you all the notes from the call. It'll summarize everything. It'll break it into chapters. It does a really, really good job, right? That's a business accelerator. So you don't have people in the classroom taking notes. I see some of us taking notes here today. It does it for you, and it does a really good job at it. So those simple tools, right, and the application of artificial intelligence and large language modules can make a difference in a business. And then building sponsorship, identifying in the organization with the folks, maybe your direct line manager or maybe some of your peers, what opportunities exist, and getting people excited. I think when I think about our interns that we've hired, when I think about new people into our organization, I'm always intrigued by people that come in and focus on things a new way. So we could do this differently, or let's apply this technology or this piece of software or this new business process, which can be accelerated through AI. I want to hear that stuff as a leader in an organization, and we look to those people because they're the evolving leaders in our organization, and they're thinking about things differently, and that's an advantage. So for these organizations, the wait and see organizations, I think establishing what we can do and showing examples are going to get people off the bench and allow you to make a difference and allow you to bring in some of these technologies, right, and apply them in your business and help promote you as an individual, as an innovator, and someone who can lead. Does anybody have any questions about this type of organization and how you might be able to add value? Great. All right, so we're going to go on to the next one, which I think is the broad bucket of organizations, which is the strategic. And it's missing all these graphics are generated by DALL-E, and they're really good. And so I feel bad that they're not up on the screen, but it's okay. It's a Mac. The strategic accelerator, they're a little bit different. And again, I think I set them to most large companies out there. And so some of you will join larger companies, right? Large companies approach things very methodically, right? So before they dive in, they're going to set a goal. Like with artificial intelligence, most of us have set the goal that's up here now. We're going to use AI technologies to reduce our time to market, which means develop our products faster, right? Increase revenue, which means reach more consumers, right? And then we're also going to lower operating costs by creating operational efficiencies. And that means we're going to go through our organization, we're going to look at the way that we do things, and we're going to figure out, can we do this differently with AI, or do we need to do this at all, right? And I can give you some real world examples of that. So this is what most of us are focused on. In addition to these sort of big broad strokes, like can we partner with someone who's an AI company who's doing what we do, but maybe partner with them and make that a new line of business? And that's more business development. And so we see a lot of that happening right now. And there's announcements every day with companies partnering with an AI organization who's going to do X for them. For us, a lot of it's drug development. So partnering with they're going to take a share, we're going to take a share, and they're going to supposedly bring to market faster a particular medicine. So they set goals, but then they also form guiding principles because it's a large organization and you will be subject to these principles, right? Which are, we're going to focus on quick wins. So we're going to get our feet wet. We talked about that earlier. They're going to dive in. They're going to do a few things that are easy. Like talked about Zoom AI. That's a really easy one. They may develop a couple of easy processes. So, and then follow through with some bold opportunities, which are bigger, more advanced processes, may have multiple functions in the organization involved, could be very expensive. A great example of a quick win for us was, and Murtaza may have talked about this, but we have a group of people that answer product complaints. So product complaints come to us a couple of different ways. They come in through either email or it could be a call. Typically, there's an attachment that says the product was cloudy, I couldn't use it, or it was expired, or whatever, right? It may also indicate that maybe there's an adverse event related to that, meaning the patient, they didn't want to give it to the patient, or the patient had a reaction, and they're attributing that. And we have to evaluate all that, and the government gives us 15 days to do it, and we can't violate that. It would be essentially against the FDA's Code of Federal Regulations, CFRs. So we have to evaluate all that. We have to respond to the physician or the calling person, whoever the person was. We have to send a response to them. Yes, we got this. Yes, we're looking into it. And here's what we think it is. And we have to then categorize it, make it available for the government. The government reviews this from us every year. So they come in a couple times a year, usually unannounced. They ask to see all this stuff. They compare what you have to what they have. They make sure that you've reported everything. And then we actually have to go through the organization and actually evaluate, was this really a valid complaint? Was it really, could it have caused an adverse event? So there's a human that looks at all that. We have to code it according to the federal codes, and then it gets filed and followed up on. So that usually takes the majority of the days that we have. The larger your product footprint is, obviously, the more likely you are to get a complaint. It could be anything. Sometimes people leave stuff out of the refrigerator and it generates a product complaint, right? So we've replaced that entire process with AI. So it reads it in, it automatically takes it apart, it understands what it says, it automatically codes it, it suggests to us whether there could be an adverse event related based on what's written. It generates the response letter to the physician, right? It then files it in our system, and then it taps the quality person on the shoulder and says, hey, I'm done. Can you please review this? So that human in the loop is important, right? So how do we know it's actually right? So we ran it against about 5 years worth of product complaints, and it had a 98% accuracy. Pretty darn good, right? So that's something that definitely works. And for us, that was a quick win. It didn't take us long to do it. Amazon.com, we had partnered with Amazon last year. So AWS, not Amazon.com. So we partnered with AWS and they helped us build it. So AWS, we use their Bedrock platform, which is an AI platform. It's built into AWS. We used we used Claude, which is a competing LLM to, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Claude, but most universities are using it as well. It's a sort of cheaper version of ChatGPT, if you will. And so we use Claude, and then we use what are called lambdas in AWS, which are these little processes that you can call, and it actually will, do various things like read images. So we use that to automate the entire process. So we were able to do that really quickly. We did it in probably 3 or 4 weeks, which is pretty good. It was a quick win, easy, but it really changed the game for us because we can process 10 times. We could do in milliseconds what it used to take days to do, right, in terms of processing one of these complaints. We still allow the human to actually make the final call, whether it's right or not. But we had to retrain people. It's a lot harder to look at something that you think is right and find what's wrong about it than it is to start it from the beginning on your own. So we also had to, we discovered that it was people to find the mistakes or to really evaluate it was a totally different side of your brain, if you will, than actually writing it yourself from the very beginning. So we had to retrain a lot of our staff to do it. It doesn't cost any jobs. It just allows us to get bigger and scale, right? As instead of having to necessarily hire more people. So thinking about these processes and how to do them differently, but really how to get to that outcome, those are the quick wins in the organization, things you're going to want to do. Also, I talked a little bit about we use Zoom AI, but we also have like Chat GPT for the organization, where as a new employee or a new person, you're coming into the organization, you don't know what the cell phone policy is, you don't know what the lunch policy, whatever. You could type it in and it'll actually answer you. So it's been trained on all the organizational documents, and it's conversational and it can answer all those questions for you. There's also rules and regulations about certain things, like can I go out to dinner with a doctor, if I'm a sales rep? The answer is no, you can't. You can't pay for their dinner. That's a good thing for all of us. But you can ask it that question and it knows, right? And it'll even ask, like, do you know of a situation where this happened? And then it'll allow you to put in an ethics complaint. So it's pretty smart, and the FDA loves it. We love it. Its employees love it, and we have about 3,000 calls a day to it for an employee base of about 3,000 people. So that's pretty good. So there's lots of these low-hanging fruit that these companies are experimenting with, and we're not alone. Everybody's sort of doing these. Are probably the big ticket ones that everyone's doing. They're doing the Chat GPT style stuff, if you will, and these small process orchestrations. But then there's the big, bold opportunities that happen as a result of those quick wins. And they're thinking, as I said, so how can we develop drugs faster? How can we, get a medicine from bench to bedside in not 15 years, but maybe 5 years, right? And can we do that by using real world evidence, biobanks, as I said earlier, and doing analysis on that data, on the genomes of folks who have contributed to those programs? And can we find genetic mutations a lot quicker than we can in the lab, right, using our own sequencers? And the answer is yes. And there's a lot of people building businesses like that. Google's one of them. There's an arm of Alphabet called Google Ventures. And what they do is they spin up companies and they operate pretty independently. They're one that's doing it. There's Atlas. There's a bunch of companies that are doing this. And we'll talk about that in a second. But those are those bold opportunities. Can we partner with one of those companies and do things completely different and create a new line of business for ourselves using AI? Any questions on this stuff before we dive into the next one? Yes.
Yeah, I have one question. When you're talking about rethinking the way you look at it as looking for the mistakes, like
Yep.
kind of easier said than done, I would say. Why was it that much of a big deal that you did have to start retraining some people to look at it differently? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds easy, but
Yeah. I guess it's for the same reason that when we write a paper for school or even for work, it's harder because you know in your mind what you're looking for. When you read it, you don't pick up your errors, right? Because you know what you meant and you write it, but maybe your colleague reads it or your roommate or whatever, and they're like, oh, your grammar's off here, you forgot a the over here, maybe it's easier for them to find it because they're specifically looking. They don't know what you meant to say. I think with these reports, these are quality engineers and they know exactly what the report's going to say. And so they're just scanning it as opposed to actually reading it. And they're not necessarily, they have the data next to them as well. So they also have to, in their brain, analyze, is this accurately represent this data? And with a 98% correct, track record, they're not used to seeing failures. So all of a sudden, they get too comfortable. They start reading it, and it looks good. It looks good. It looks good. So we have to train people. These are the things you want to specifically look for. What are the strategies you can use to identify when something might be wrong, and just kind of help them do it. So our biggest concern was that people would just get too comfortable with the technology, and they would just start passing stuff through. They just click through like we all do with the pop-up boxes that come up in our browser. You just click through it, right? So that was, to us, was the biggest risk. And I think it's too soon to tell if that's going to happen, but all right. So the strategic accelerators then take their low-hanging fruit and their long-term bets, and they create a whole process. And Murtaza talked, I don't want to go through this too deeply because I know he talked about it last week, and if you were in that meeting. But they set up what's called centralized oversight. So if we're going to do AI, for example, most companies want to do it in a controlled manner. So they don't want every group doing their own thing because they're afraid they'll replicate the same experiments, or they might come up with 2 different technologies that do the same thing, and they don't want to spend on that. So they'll create a centralized oversight group that'll say, well, these are the AI technologies or processes in the business we're going to invest in. They also then hand it off to the business, and they make sure folks in the business actually are going to participate. And you might be a participant of that as a grad, right? They then build what's called a clear and consistent communication plan, where they're telling the organization what's happening. Hey, we're moving into AI. And I will tell you, AI scares people because they associate it to them losing their job, especially if they're doing something that's redundant, right? And so we want to be open with people in the organization. They want people to understand this isn't going to take their job. It's just going to help them do their job better or faster, right? And other than the one I shared with you and a few programmers at a local development firm, I haven't really heard of people losing their jobs with this stuff, but I have heard of people, being upskilled or being replaced by people that understood some of this stuff. So this is really important that you kind of learn it. And then they set up oversight and governance. Identify and mitigate any risks. And we talked a little bit about risks of mistakes. There's also privacy risks. There's risks to patents, right? For example, the patent law says human generated or generated by humans. So if you're developing a new product and it's developed by AI, you're opening yourself up to a patent lawsuit down the road where someone's going to try and introduce a generic version of what you're doing to invalidate your patent. There's things like that that you have to think about. And so that's what the Oversight and Governance Committee thinks about. And also, is this fit for our business, right? And is this AI solvable, right? Is this something AI will actually do well? So they set themselves up and they actually orchestrate these AI use cases in their businesses in a very sort of structured and managed way. I apologize for the pictures being missing. And I will pass it out with the pictures, not that they're that much better. So how do you as a graduate, how do you add value in these businesses? How do you get involved in this? What are their expectations of you? One is, again, to generate. This is kind of true for all of them. You need to generate excitement. You need to be able to talk about what's going on in the industry you're in. If you're a developer, you want to talk about how some of the codes, like for example, Google is generating code, and we use Bard at my office to generate code for us automatically, right? So you want to be able to talk about that. If you're a marketing person, you want to understand what's going on in the environment for use from AI tools to be able to generate marketing drafts or marketing materials, right? If you're in finance, we use there are AI algorithms now to do forecasting, right? So we use so we're implementing now an AI forecasting tool. So it'll look at market conditions, it'll look at all kinds of things, and it'll help organizations put their what are called strategic long-term plans, right? It'll help build all of that using AI. So how do you upskill the organization on what's possible? Two is you want to focus on outcomes over output, and this is really important in general. I mentioned earlier that you're all innovators. You're all, kind of coming into the work. Most of you, at least, will be coming into the workforce, and you're going to approach things differently because you don't have a frame of reference, right? So you want to focus on what are we trying to do and why are we trying to do it, right? So most of us, we think about what we have to do ultimately, but we don't necessarily think about what So I need to ultimately provide a service or a product, right, to another organization. So my product could be data, right? I provide data to the finance group, and then they're able to determine, what our financial direction is for the next 5 years. So there's a process that I follow. I get data from all the various business units. I aggregate that data. We then check it for errors or omissions, and then we get it into the hands of finance, right? Maybe that's my job. But am I focused on that process, or am I focused on what finance really needs, which is a long-term strategic plan? Could I then use AI to actually generate that using market dynamics and maybe not have to aggregate that data at all? Maybe that doesn't need to happen. Maybe as we collect the information in the organization, the AI algorithm could be generating in real time changes to that market forecast. That's rethinking work, right? Maybe all of that doesn't need to happen. Maybe that outcome is achievable a different way now with the capabilities that we have using machine learning and or generative AI, for example. And then, thinking about the processes that you have, can they be enhanced? I think as graduating students, those are the areas that you want to think about when you're moving into these organizations, and how you can apply AI and can it actually change the game for these organizations, accelerate them, make them work fast. And they love hearing this stuff. They want to hear this stuff. We do. We want to hear this stuff. We want to know what's different. And they're pressuring their own people to come up with these ideas, but they're having a hard time because, again, they all have a frame of reference. So it's a little bit more difficult for people that have been in the business. So it's a real opportunity, I think, for graduating students. And then, I think also mastering the art of prompt engineering, and you could take classes on this, but how to ask questions is really, really important. So when you're using AI technologies and you're putting everybody uses ChatGPT, I would imagine. all your papers probably, at least. I know my kids use it on a regular basis. But the way you ask the question is going to largely dictate how accurate your answer is. And it's the same with Claude, for example, I mentioned earlier that we use for our product complaints, et cetera. But prompt engineering is really, really critical. So we actually write documents related to our research and development that are key parts of what we have to give these documents to federal agencies around the world in order to get approval for our drugs around the world. The drafts of those can be written by AI now, right? Because they follow a format. It's pretty straightforward. It reads data, it then turns data into words, and it generates these documents. So we're able to do that a lot quicker with AI now, right? Because we generate the draft, and then all we have to go through is change it, right? But the way the prompt is written and how it wants that document to look is very, very important. And if we get feedback from an agency that says, I don't understand section 3, we could take that feedback and incorporate that into the prompt. So when it generates the next version of that document, it's smarter, right? So over time, it gets smarter and smarter, and you get more likely to be correct. So prompt engineering is really, really important. It's one of the things that we're educating all of our employees on, which is how to use our tools, like the one I mentioned earlier, where you can ask questions anywhere within the business about policies and procedures, how to ask that in a way where you're going to get the best results. So, it could be, what's the spend limit for cell phones versus I'm an employee of, Alnylam UK, right? And I'm a director in the company. What is my cell phone spend limit? Like that level of detail is critical to getting the right answer, right? Because there could be different, spend limits per country and per employee. So I think that's really important to understand prompt engineering. You can go on like Microsoft's site, or you can go on Google's site, or even OpenAI, and it will teach you prompt engineering. And we've incorporated it in our tool. You can click a button after you ask questions, is how can I have asked this in a better way? And it'll actually suggest to you how to be a better prompt engineer. So we're actually training our employees in real time. So that's really important stuff to know as well. And then know what products and services are available to you. As you move into the industry and you move into your particular field and your job role, know what AI tools are available out there and suggest them to the organization. Try and bring them in. I think that will benefit you as well and make you the change agent in these organizations. And they want to see stuff like this. I think in the pharma industry, we're seeing a ton of tools based around development of clinical trial materials, accelerating clinical trials. We're seeing a ton of material around generating marketing materials, generating how-to documents for physicians, and all these. They're all publicly available products that you can buy now. And we have people that are in our organization that are just going through and they're trying all these things to see which ones work and which ones work best, right? So I think that's really important to kind of know what's out there, and that's going to put you ahead of your peers when you walk into an organization and apply for a role and you say, well, I know we're doing some really cool things, in this particular area using these particular tools. I know I'm impressed by that when people come into our organization. Any questions on these types of, yeah.
Does Google, they have that certificate program?
Yeah.
Do they have one in AI?
I think they do. I know that MIT does as well, and there's a few other. There's a school, and obviously schools, a few other schools that have certificate programs in AI as well. Microsoft has a whole site, that purely focuses on this, and prompt engineering and understanding machine learning, Python scripting, API, exposure, things like that. They also have a whole governance site. And one of the other things that's really important for AI is we're seeing a lot of neurodiverse people benefit from it as well. So a lot of companies are deploying it for employees who have some neurodiversity, whether it's autism or it could be anything, because it helps them organize their thoughts a little better, and it suggests to them how to develop a paper quicker. So even the schools are looking at it for that now as well. So you're going to see this stuff pop up in a lot of organizations, and Microsoft has a whole sort of suite of products and speaks about Copilot, which is their product, and specifically around neurodiversity. So if you have children at home, for example, or something like that, or friends, it's a good thing to turn them on to that could help them. Yeah.
I know our university's Career and Professional Development Center has a number of Google licenses or whatever they are that they can make available to students. So that might be a nice way to augment what
Yeah.
you're getting here with, to be one of these people who goes in and
Yeah.
more ready.
LinkedIn Learning too. actually has a bunch of
What is that?
LinkedIn Learning.
Oh, okay.
So they have a bunch of training courses that people can take as well that will help you with prompt engineering. But I think honestly, it's really just understanding. One of the pictures worked. It's really just understanding, kind of what's available in the field that you're going into in finance, et cetera, and being able to speak intelligently about it. So go study it and understand when you go in for an interview or when you start a new job, for example, what things are available for your particular role so that you can educate yourself on it and be a change agent and stay on top of it and be that person that takes other people's jobs, essentially, because you're that much further ahead and you're staying on top of it. And then there's all-in organizations. And I work with these guys pretty regularly, which their entire business model is based on AI. And I was just mentioning to Mark, I had a great conversation with the folks over at Google recently. They spin up companies left, right, and sideways of doing various things on this. And they have some very cool technology that's about to come out for various businesses and industry. We were focused on life sciences, but and essentially, these companies they're trying to add value or add products or capabilities into our companies that we don't have or that we do, but take a really long time and we want to do them differently. And they focus on what investors think of us. So if you're an investor and you're investing in a new company, you want to invest in a company that you think is going to have some level of competitive advantage, right? So I'll give you a great example. A lot of investors look at new biotechs and they figure out, if it's going to take me 15 years to develop a drug, that's a long-term investment, right? If I could do it in 5, don't you think I'd be a better investment than 15 years, right? If I could grow your money in 5. So they're acutely focused right now on AI in life sciences and biotechs. I don't know if you know this, but most biotechs are funded by venture capital. So they are, they have a really great research item. Maybe it's a genetic drug for cancer that's come out of a university, and then they go and they raise capital and they try and turn it into a medicine for all of us. And it takes billions of dollars and usually about 15 years or more for it to happen. So it's a long-term investment, but it's not governments and others. It's really venture capitalists that do this, and they do it for the end game return, right? But if I could do it in 5 years, if I come to you and I say I can run your whole trial in 5 years using machine learning and a bunch of genetic sequencing and genome databases, I'm a better bet. So investors are pushing hard on this because there's a lot of companies popping up to provide these capabilities and these services. And it's not just in medicine; it's in manufacturing. It's kind of all over the place. So they have this novel approach or this new way of doing in Zoom, I thought was interesting because they put that note-taking capability in for free, where everybody else was going to charge for it. So they kind of jumped the market, right? So investors love that for them, and so did we as employees. But there's lots of this happening, and it's great opportunities for all of us to jump into one of these innovative companies, and they operate a little differently, and then a lot of them share the risk. So if I'm a company, I'm coming in with a new technology like AI, and I tell you that I can develop your drug in 5 years, okay, but my drug is essentially everything I have, and my whole business is based on this development of this. I'm a biotech, right? So for example, my whole business model is based on the success of this drug. I'm not willing to really risk that, right? So what these companies are doing is they're saying, all right, well, we'll share the risk with you. We'll pay for your clinical trial, right? And which you maybe couldn't do without raising money anyway, right? If you'll allow us to apply this technology and we'll work with you. And then if it's successful, we'll share the returns in some kind of a business deal. And we're seeing that not only in biotech, we're seeing that in pharma, we're seeing it kind of across the board where these companies are jumping in. And because the technology is new and it's on that hype cycle, people are a little nervous. They're doing BD deals or business development deals to get customers rather than to sell them a product, which is a more traditional model that I think we're all used to. And so there's a lot of opportunities in those companies too. And the one thing I want to say too that I think is really important, I don't know, is anybody here a CS major? No? Okay. Well, I think being a CS major is really helpful, but you need to pair it with a business kind of focus. Everybody ends up in an industry. Like I ended up in pharmaceutical or biotech, right? It wasn't my mission when I graduated. It was just the path that I took, right? And so everybody's going to end up in an industry. Having the kind of technical prowess to complement the business, or if you're a finance person, you're going to end up in finance, probably in an industry, right? Because once you get industry knowledge, and this is important for everybody to know, and maybe you already know this, but we as industry leaders, we look for other people that have the same industry background as us. So if I'm a biotech guy, when I go through resumes, I'm looking for biotech people, even if it's a finance job or an IT job. If I'm in manufacturing, I'm looking for people with manufacturing experience. If I'm in chemical, I look for people with chemical. I don't know why we do it, but we do. And so it's really important that as your finance person, you end up in an industry, whatever that industry is, and you can change industries, obviously, but it's harder as time goes on to change industries. It's easier in the beginning. So pick an industry that you like because you might be in it for a while. Um, it's important to complement that with these kind of technical skills to understand how machine learning and AI work in your particular industry and in your particular discipline, finance, marketing, whatever it happens to be. If you're a CS person, flip that over. It's the other way around. It's really important from a CS perspective, from a computer science perspective, to understand the business that you're in and how that business operates so that you can add value, right? Because if it's just computer science and you're just focused on the IT part of it, it's going to be, when you go to get hired and when you're trying to do really cool stuff in especially in one of these companies, they want to understand that you understand the industry that you're in and what the outcome and the value is that you're providing, right? So again, I think, individuals with strong foundations in data and data management are going to benefit with AI in these organizations. Also, data interoperability and machine learning. I think those are all really good things to familiarize yourself with as you move into the workforce. And especially if you're interested in implementing some of this stuff as you move into that workforce, it's really important to kind of know the fundamentals of the basics of this. And if you're a CS major, I can't stress enough how important data is for any of this to really work. I mean, I think the biggest holdback we have right now with machine learning and AI is just the quality of data. There's just so much data in the world; it's ubiquitous, but it's all contradictory data. There's gaps. People in larger companies, especially older companies, they kept their data completely separate, and it's very difficult to bring that data together in any meaningful way. But it is changing, and I think organizations really are looking for people that have. There's a lot of data kind of jobs out there right now, especially data mastery. If you're in finance, for example, customer masters, vendor masters, finance, and there's just a lot of focus on that. So adding value, data. Know the data, know the industry that you're in. Business and technology focus. Technology is most powerful combined. I mentioned that earlier. And then technical skills, right? Data sciences, if you're a computer science person, data sciences, algorithmic analysis, Python, recursion. Recursion is really important because recursion is just a way of taking the output of one experiment and feeding it into the same experiment again, and then getting better results each time. And recursion is something that's machine learning and recursion have been around for a really long time, but we're really seeing traction in drug development, for example, right now using that strategy. And as computer scientists, we're like, yeah, of course, we've been doing this for years, right? But I think businesses are just kind of picking that up now. Yeah, so that was basically the the presentation. Any questions? And you have any questions about AI? How we're using AI? Things that you're thinking about as a grad? Yeah.
Why would you prefer to use Bard for coding over ChatGPT?
Because when we first implemented it, OpenAI. So Bard was available to us. We got into the early access program, so it was available to us. So we were able to actually use it before we would have been able to use ChatGPT for coding, and we had good results from it. We do bioinformatics, so we're doing a lot of data shaping, and it was really good at that. And the results that we got were also pretty good. And our developers, really, I think they were more akin to using, a non-Microsoft related product. So that's why we probably all the wrong reasons, right? But again, it's all about getting there early, especially with companies. The same reason we went with AWS, to be honest with you, over enterprise ChatGPT. AWS came to us, they said, you guys are innovative, we want to be innovative, let's work together. We said, all right, we can hit the ground running faster. Their product, Bedrock, wasn't even on the market. It was out for 6 more months, but we were using it, right? So we went live with them. They showcased us in New York City and in Boston. So we were able to do all this stuff a lot quicker. And again, it's all about the networks that you forge and with the reps and the people in those organizations and how you get picked for that stuff. They gave us, I want to say it was close to $100,000 worth of effort to build this stuff out. So it's really important, right? And all of our staff, our IT department really got trained up on it, and our quality people, they were part of the project as well. They all got trained up, but they're all experts on AI now in our quality department, which is really amazing. But it's really about these efforts and getting people involved, and AWS gave us an opportunity to do that quickly. Plus, we used AWS to manage all of our data because, obviously with the elasticity of that environment, and we have I think 125 terabytes worth of genomic data, which is not even a lot, frankly. We're able to store it there. So, yes, sir.
I was impressed with, like, in the middle when you mentioned about having AI check your documents. I think finding the missing does and that kind of thing is important. What I always used to depend on another person to do because I'm a writer and an editor was I would ask a trusted colleague and I'd say, read this and tell me what you think I'm trying to get you to do.
Yeah.
And it'll do that, you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, it'll actually rewrite it for you. If you tell it exactly what you're trying to get it to, it'll take your document and rewrite it for you so it's still in your voice. And you can even tell, so we have, so everybody familiar with Grammarly?
Yes.
So Grammarly will train itself on documents that you've written, and it'll actually then write documents in your voice, which is pretty amazing. And it will go through and find the missing does and the doubled up ands and all that stuff as well. So they're using, I believe they're using OpenAI as well, but they've crafted it and they've built this internal prompt engineering capability, which will craft it to work in your. It's terrifying and amazing all at the same time.
My son is using that.
Yep.
We were talking before about where he is. He's a marketing guy, he's a writer, and he was showing me examples of stuff that they had done, and it sounded just like him. I mean,
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
some of the stuff he would mimic my voice,
Yeah.
and I could see that. I'm like, damn, that looks familiar.
It is. It's amazing. We actually, so every company does earnings calls, right? So you have to write this whole script about your earnings. And there's all these different parts. There's this, here's what we've accomplished. This is why it's great. This is the money we've made, and maybe it's not as good as you expected. So you really got to hype it up, like, but man, are we great? These are these new products that are coming out. We actually write the drafts of that using Claude now. So all that's done. We've trained it on 100 and something previous versions that we've written. We prompt engineer it. We give it the sections that we want, and it actually writes our earnings call transcript for us. And then they go in and they change the draft. So it really does change the way people work. And I think for all of us moving into this field, these tools are going to be, very important to the way that you do your job, and you're going to be expected to use them. And I think probably within the next few years, it will become kind of the steak and potatoes, right? Of everything that we do for writing and for automation. And again, we're using them now. So, and I think a lot of companies are like us. So, any other questions? I know we're probably close to, yeah, it's 150. Any other questions about, as you think about yourself moving into this field? Yeah.
I was wondering, like, how do you use, you personally, how do you use AI, like maybe for more benign things or like,
Yeah. So I just had a staff meeting. We do every year for our entire IT organization globally. We do what's called a career development day. And what we do is we bring in a bunch of people from different disciplines who are, lead programmers at Red Hat, for example, or maybe they're, we do a lot of IT is less technical today than it is process oriented. So we might bring in a lead process engineer from McKinsey or Bain, and we did. I wrote the entire agenda and all of the materials using our tool that we call Ask Alnylam, which is really Claude based. So the whole thing was written, and then I just modified them. It would have taken me, because I'm slow, it would have taken me like a few days to write it up. But it suggested to me, here are the things you need to think of. This is what you're trying to accomplish. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. These are the things that we're going to present. Can you write me the materials? And it wrote the whole thing for me. So I use it for things like that. I use it for calendaring. So we have so Copilot. If I don't know if you have a university version of it, but it'll do a lot of your calendaring. So we use it and we've rolled it out across the organization now. So everybody seems to be using it. We do it for summarizations on marketing and competitive. So we'll take all the materials that a competitor has submitted to the FDA and we'll ingest that in now and we'll go through it and we'll look for, it'll highlight for us what are the key things that you can compete against. Here are some ideas, and it'll actually go through and intelligently, and it's good at it. So we use it for competitive analysis, market research. We're using it for anything that requires summarization. So if we have like a nature document, which is 1,200 pages, and we're looking for anything in that document that might have signaled an adverse event from this particular research, maybe not ours, it'll go through and within 2 seconds, it'll show on page 1,300, it said this and this and this, and it'll go through and it'll summarize it in a matter of seconds. I mean, it's amazing how quickly it can do that. Yep. So those are the areas that we're using, and we're also using it for machine learning again for that recursion in drug development. So for our drugs are RNA based. So you have a genetic mutation in your body, you're born with it, you develop, say for example, cardiomyopathy, and it's a result of a bad protein being folded in your body, and your genome is telling you to produce that protein, right? So it's your own body that's because it has a genomic defect, right? It's called a mutation. So we'll go through an entire genetic database and we'll look for people that have this, and we'll identify where the common genome, kind of mutation is, and we'll be able to identify that mutation. We'll then be able to generate an RNA to go in and find that protein, that RNA, messenger RNA. We'll be able to bind to it and cut it so that your body never gets the instructions to produce that bad, protein or whatever the disease is that you have. So essentially, if you think about a spill of water, small molecule, large molecule drugs, they're just cleaning up the symptoms. They're cleaning up the water on the floor. These genetic medicines are going and they're shutting off the spigot. Right. So it's a little different approach. And that's all data based. That's all about data. That's understanding, in large populations of people, where is that? Because your genome is so large, where is that similarity? Why are all these people developing this particular, this particular disease? What is the difference? And if we can find it, and it could be in any organ, for example, so it's a lot of data. If we can find that commonality, we could typically produce an RNAi to address it. So from a drug development platform, it's gold, right? Because you can go through and you can find people who have diseases with we call them orphan diseases. There are no medications to address it because nobody understands it. We can find that commonality. We can help those people, right? And I think probably everybody in this room knows somebody who's had a cancer or something else that was untreatable, right? And to be able to help those people, that's the game, right? That's what we want to be able to do. So for us, we use it for that as well. And I know a lot of other companies are as well. I'm actually on the advisory board of a company in Pennsylvania, and we're doing the same thing. So they have a cancer drug. It's actually a little different than ours, and it's a genetic medicine. They're actually modifying a genome. But we used big data, and we used a third party, right, who actually had access to this large database. We're actually able to identify, and they were actually able to stop the cancer in their patients in their clinical phase 1. So they're actually going for approval now, which is huge, right? I mean, it's huge. But I do think for cancers and other types of medicines, these genetic medicines and these cellular therapies are going to be where everything goes, and that's all database, and that's all AI, right? So that's finding, identifying, and it could be more than one genomic defect, right? Which makes it that much more complicated. And a lot of them are. There are 2 or 3, right? So it's being able to identify that. I found one, feed that information in, look for additional patients. Do they have that 1 plus 2, right? Maybe it's a third. And you also see a lot of people. Everybody knows somebody who has Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, probably. Okay, so that's where the most research is right now, other than cancer, is getting across the blood-brain barrier with these, genetic medicines, and they're using just gobs and gobs of bio data, genomic data from these genomic databases. Like in Massachusetts, we have the Broad, which is a genomic database. We have the UK Biobank. There's a bunch of them. And they're going through and they're finding medicines like to address tau, right, which is the plaque that builds up in the brain of these patients. So where is that coming from? How do we identify it? And there's some amazing results that we're seeing. ALS, same thing. So hopefully in our life, maybe not, I think probably my kid's lifetime, maybe your lifetime, you'll see some of these come out. Some of them are out now. Childhood leukemia. They're already, we had a presentation by a little girl who's 10 years cancer free. There's absolutely no cancer in her body at all after the treatment, and she was in a coma. Right, so they didn't even know it would save her life. Genetic medicine, again, they used machine learning to actually go through the entire database and build this medication. And it would 3 or 4 years ago, I think, was the first or no, it would have been, she was in the trial, so she was a little earlier. But I think it's definitely commercially available now. We're seeing some amazing results. So for all of us, it's a good thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Any other questions about, maybe? Yeah.
So earlier you were talking about how you look into resumes specifically for certain backgrounds, like everything the biotech industry.
Yeah.
How would you would recommend getting the certificates direct as like an underlying layer for?
So it depends on the field that you're going into. So if you're going into finance, for example, and you're applying in a certain industry, you may want to use ChatGPT to help you craft your resume in a way that specifically aligns with the expectations of that industry. Or you may want to mention projects that you did that were relevant for that particular industry. And you can have different resumes for different, but all of our resumes are reviewed by AI. Every single resume we get goes, and everyone today, right? Even LinkedIn is doing an automatic, it automatically separates the resumes based on, what your knowledge is in your particular industries. So it's really important to know that when you put it together. And when you apply to an organization, even in the conversations, to speak about what's relevant for their particular industry. It's just a thing. People are really believe that we all believe we're different. in various industries and biotech. If you're applying for a biotech and life science, I look for those names. Like, oh, he was at Biogen. Oh, fantastic. Or he was at Alexion. I don't know, New Haven. Yeah, I was at Alexion. We all look for those sort of backgrounds, and we look for project experience for younger people, especially folks that have come off internships, that have done internships in our industry. And if they haven't, we look for projects that are relevant for industry. My nephew just got a job for NASA, and he had his resume out for a bit and wasn't getting any responses. So we looked at, for his particular role, which is spaceflight operations that he does, what specifically do you need? What projects did you do that might be relevant for the particular role that they're hiring for? He updated his resume, he put it back out there, and he got a call within a week. So I do think it's really important and even government space flight, apparently they do the same thing. So they're looking for keywords, and I do think that's really important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can use those opportunities once you get into network and build your network. We talked about this a few minutes ago. I can't tell you how important that is to build your network and to leave on good terms and really start to, especially now. I mean, I mentioned I had that conversation with Google. I know that gentleman from another business that we did, and so we all end up kind of interconnecting over the years. So that's really important to build your network as you do this as well. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? I do a lot of hiring, so I mean,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much for this.